Chevre, hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. As usual, we'll begin with a prayer. This time we'll choose Pasuk Gimel from Kapitel Samach Aleph. And the Pasuk says, Miktzei ha'aretz elecha ekar b'teif libi b'tzur yorim mimeni sancheni, which means when my heart is cloaked in troubles, from the end of the earth I call to you, lead me upon the rock that is beyond my reach. So I'm going to learn Pshat, that this is talking about the Jews in exile. That's what it means, from the end of the earth, from a very distant place. And what does it mean? I call to you, that is Hashem to help us, but who is our inspiration? The Avos, the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, like the Pasuk says, Mireish Tzurim Arenu, from the top of the cliffs, and that refers to the Avos, the patriarchs. And that is beyond my reach. So we're going to relate it to this week's parsha, Vayechi, which talks about how Yaakov passes away, and he makes Yosef swear that he'll take him out of Egypt. So the Jew is in Egypt, he's in an exile, but he has Yaakov, and the spirit of Yaakov, and the inspiration of Yaakov, that's beyond, outside of Egypt. And from there we gain the strength to be able to endure Egypt, the exile. So, today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, like we said, Parshas Vayechi. This week, this past Tuesday was Asara B'Tevis, it was a fast day, and this is also going to be Shabbos Chazak. So we have to understand the connection between all these things. How is it Chazak? How is it connected to Asara B'Tevis? And the connection to Parshas Vayechi. In general, those that are in the business of speaking know that sometimes it could be just as difficult to prepare the speech as in deciding what to speak about. Because there's so much to speak about, there's so many interesting sichos and talks from the Rebbe, and Torah is infinite, so that itself could take a while to really feel about a certain subject, to really decide to speak about it, to think what's maybe important at this time of the year, etc., etc. So the answer to my dilemma this week was clear, because as we said many times, we have to live with the parsha of the week, which means that we have to listen to the messages. God is speaking to you and giving you something that's relevant now through the parsha. And we see in this week's parsha that there was a certain message that was delivered to us, not once, but twice. So I decided, if that's the case, that means for sure that's what I have to internalize, absorb, and speak about. And that is that on one hand, straight away, at the beginning of the parsha, it says that this parsha is different than any other parsha in the Torah. Yes, Rashi says, Lama parsha zu stuma, why is this parsha closed? And he gives two reasons. What it means that it's closed is there's no gap between Vayechi and the preceding parsha, Vayigash. So that's what it means, it's closed. There's no opening, there's no space that marks a beginning of this new parsha. Closed means that it follows immediately. So he says one reason, the eyes of Israel was closed. And then it says, Doveracha, another interpretation, Shebikish legalis es haketz. Yaakov gathered all his children and he wanted to reveal to them the end. Bikish legalis es haketz, he wanted to reveal to them the end. What's going to be at the end of times, the end, when it will be the final redemption. Lebanav to his sons, v'nista mimenu, was closed off from him. That means that it was closed. So just like Yaakov's vision, prophecy, to a certain degree, was closed, so too, this parsha is closed. Because it happened now, over here, in this week's parsha. Similarly, a couple of psukim later, this is in the first pasuk of the parsha, And that means this refers to the whole parsha, which means it's a message that we have to live with every single day of the week. But later on, in Revi, it says, Vayikra Yaakov Abonav, Yaakov called his sons, Vayemer, He'osru v'agidu lechem, Eis asher yikra eschem ba'achas hayomim. I will tell you now, assemble yourselves, and I will tell you what will befall you in the end of days. And Rashi over here also says, V'agidu lechem, bikish legalis es haketz. He wanted to reveal the end to them. V'nistalka mimenu shchina, v'hischel omer dvarim acherim. So that special detail, information, had departed from him, so to speak, and he told them other things. He couldn't tell it to his children. So over here, as usual, we'll see that without Chassidus, it's very difficult to understand. And even with Chassidus, we're going to talk more b'derech drush, like the lesson. Even though we really don't understand exactly in all these such of matters, when it comes to Rebbe stuff, I call it tzaddikim gemurim stuff, that's between them and Hashem. When they have these dialogues or issues that happen between them, it's hard to relate to and understand. In any case, first let's talk about the obvious questions. First of all, what's the point? What would be the meaning over here? What is Yaakov going to tell them? That the exile is going to be going on for thousands and thousands of years? That will only cause them to be depressed. They'll be crushed. They'll be heartbroken. What's the idea? What's the point? What's the positive message behind it? How would that be encouragement? So we have to understand why Bikish Yaakov legalis es haketz. And on the other hand, we have to understand why the Lashon it says, "V'nistalka mimenu shchina." Obviously, the Eibush had other plans. So, A, we have to understand what's the point of Yaakov. B, we have to understand why would the Eibush not allow that to happen. And C, we have to understand, if the Eibush doesn't allow it to happen, in addition to the idea, what's the point? Obviously, it has to be a good thing. Because Yaakov is a tzaddik gomer, and if he wants it, that means for sure it's good. Besides for what's the point? It's a good thing. And we have to understand, why would the Eibush prevent it from happening? So the Rebbe gives a couple of answers. I'm going to tell you the kernel of what I'm saying now is based on the Sikh of the Rebbe in Likutei Sichas Chelik Chof, Vayechi. It's adapted from that Sikh. So the Rebbe basically says that what Yaakov was going to tell them, A, is not really about the end, meaning the final redemption, but the end of Golus Mitzrayim, what was supposed to be for another 200 years, let's say, or more, give or take. You could ask a question. They knew that already before, that it was only going to be 400 years. What's the big contribution? What does Yaakov have to tell them, that it's going to come to an end? They know it's going to come to an end. And by the way, we know from another Rashi where Yaakov told the Jews to plant trees and take those trees out with them from Egypt. So they knew it was going to come to an end. So here the Rebbe says, what Yaakov was going to reveal to them was that if they merit, similar to what the Gemara says, Ilu zachu achishena. If they would merit, they could hasten it, even though they were foretold a certain amount of time, but it's in their hands to make it happen immediately. If they'll just be extra careful, extra vigilant, extra good, etc. How do we know that? The Rebbe says a fantastic example. Even though Yosef, when he interpreted the dreams of Parai, and everything that Yosef said came true, he said it's going to be 7 years, the years of famine. But Rashi brings down previously in last week's parsha, when Yaakov came, the famine ended. So it ended by Yaakov's coming there. So even though they were told a certain amount of years before, but through someone's merit, things could change. So this is what Yaakov wanted to affect. He wanted the Yidden to be inspired, to work harder, to be extra vigilant, to go the extra mile beyond the letter of the law. If they're going to be super, super good, so then Hashem would bring it earlier in. He'd make the redemption happen even earlier. And then you could say that this applies in general. Not only is this a message for Yaakov, and at the time of the Bnei Yisrael, concerning Golus Mitzrayim, but concerning the Geula Amitis Vashlema. In other words, Yaakov is the one who's always worried about Neshamas Yisrael, the leader, always looks at the Yidden, and he sees how they suffer. He sees how it's difficult. And the leader's job, this is the game, for lack of a better word, the role. The role of the tzaddik and the role of God is we have the role of the tzaddik, who's always the defender, trying to make it better for the Yidden. And we have the Eibishter more as the judge. That's the way it works. I don't have an understanding in these levels wherever, whether in the story of Ram Tzdoim, which has to do with Goyim, and before Matan Torah, whether the story with the Moshe Rabbeinu with the Chayei Egel, or by the Meraglim, and so on and so forth. Whenever there's an issue where Hashem wants to do a certain thing, and then the Eibishter, the Tzaddik, enters into a debate and says, maybe you shouldn't, etc. And this is similar to the story over here, and why this is so relevant and so important. We have Yaakov, and Yaakov is trying to make it better. And that's what it means, Bikish Legalis. He's here to reveal godliness, to bring more godliness into the world. Similar to what the Alter Rebbe writes in Shar HaYichad Ve'emunah Perek Beis, Shitef Yimei Midas HaRachmem. How did God bring mercy into the world? By introducing and bringing holy tzaddikim into the world. And he says through tzaddikim, tzaddikim are in the business of bringing revelation, bringing transcendence, bringing liberty, making it always easier for the Yidden. Okay, so now we understand slightly. We'll elaborate more on this later. We understand what Yaakov wanted to accomplish. But then what does it mean that the Shekhinah departed and it was closed and that the Shekhinah didn't let it happen? And before we continue, I want to say I was once by a Fabrengen. I think it was Pashas Pinchas Tavshim Mem Dalet, if I remember correctly. And I'll never forget it. The Rebbe asked a question by the Fabrengen, and sometimes the Rebbe would ask a question, and it was such a astonishing question that you thought to yourself, how is the Rebbe going to answer this? And the Rebbe's question was, if Tzaddik Goyzer V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, if a Tzaddik can make a decree, and Hashem must fulfill the promise, must fulfill the decree, Tzaddik Goyzer V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, so let the Tzaddik be Goyzer, the Mashiach should come. And then Hashem must fulfill the decree of the Tzaddik. And the Rebbe answered, no dos the Mesiras Nefesh from the Tzaddik. Et tut was der Eibishter will. This is the self-sacrifice of the tzaddik. He goes along with Hashem's plan. So this is the story over here. Because Yaakov Galas means that Yaakov wants Mashiach to come already. Because he sees the difficulties. He sees the struggles. He says it's too much. He's a Ish Elikim. He has to always defend the people from the people's point. So therefore he says, it's too much. It's too much pain. How can we bear it? Ad Mosai. So he'd rather the Geula comes now, even if it's not perfect. Better earlier than later, and a perfect redemption. So what's Hashem's problem? And why we say over here that the tzaddik has the Mesiras Nefesh, he goes along with what the Eibishter wants. And the Rebbe explains over here, and this I would say is the central theme of Hasidus Chabad, and about the whole Chabad movement, and I would say the Rebbe's years of leadership. And therefore we have to say also of Judaism. And that is that our entire service and our relationship with God has to be one that we take ownership. It actually becomes ours. It's from me, it's from I, and not something from without. And this is what it means. The Rebbe says, why did Hashem not let Yaakov accomplish that level of Bikush Legalis totally? Because then that would have meant that the redemption came through the inspiration, through the supervision, through Yaakov's efforts. It wouldn't have meant that it came through the Jews' efforts. That meant it would be something that was superimposed. That meant it was something that's only because we have a supervisor, we have a boss that's over there goading us and spurring us on the whole time. That's why it's happening. But is it really coming from us? Not necessarily. And this is what the Rebbe said by his first Fabrengen. I will help you. I will answer letters. Up medaf, mahapach zayin, the eigen and nefesh Bahamas. In the end, it's about you doing it. The most important tenet of Chabad Chassidism is avoda b'koyach atzmai. We believe this is the foundation of Judaism, about a person internalizing and making it individualistic. It's yours. Your service of Hashem, your actions came as a result of your work, and therefore it's yours. And that really means that it became one with you. And that's how the Rebbe explains, as long as what we would have been doing came as a result of Yaakov's inspiration, then it would have meant that it's Yaakov's avodah, not really ours. So to understand that, we can give two examples, which most of you have heard before, but just to reiterate it again, because it's usually not in this discussion. So number one is the famous analogy, which is brought down in Hemshech Samach Vov, the Maimer Omer Rebbe Kiva Ashreichem, Tofrei Samach Zayin, I think it's in page Shimpei, which is the mashal of the Baal Shem Tov for Tkiyah Shefer, but slightly differently. Over there he says you have a father and you have a son, and the father wants to maximize, fully develop the son's potential. And the fact is, the only way the son's potential will be fully revealed is only if the son goes away from the father. A different trade, a different set skills, a different environment, etc., etc., etc. As long as the son is living under the shadow of his father, as long as he's making use of the materials that his father's giving him, it's still not really his own work. And the son will never, never get fully developed because he's living under the shadow of his father. And over there in Samach Vav, he gives an analogy how first the father has to send him away to some master of another sort of craft, and that child has to be working like an apprentice by the other master and follow the instructions carefully. And after a long time, starting a whole new talent, diversifying a whole new realm, whether from mathematics, I'm making it up now, mathematics to physics to engineering to construction, I don't know, whatever it is. Only by spending a lot of time and developing something which is of a whole different field, then we maximize the child. There's no other way. So now what are you going to ask? Why can't a child become fully developed living under the shadow of his father? It can't. So now the only question is, if we're talking about the Eibishter Yidden, we can say the Eibishter is a Kol Yachol. So therefore he could have done it. He could have made Gullus easier, and he's such a Kol Yachol that he accomplished anything. That even though we can understand how it's possible that a person should develop fully under the shadow of the father, but the Eibishter can make anything possible. True. And for that we don't have an answer. And in general, I just want to say that the Rebbe said all reasons for Gullus have expired. So therefore we're not justifying one more second that we're in Gullus. But nevertheless, each one of us has to look inside himself and understand today. I'm not talking about the nation. I'm not talking about the fact that Mashiach should come. I'm not even talking about the fact that the Rebbe said that regardless of my situation and my condition, Mashiach is meant to be here now. He was meant to be here yesterday. But still, now, being that I have to be a person that has to develop my maximum. If someone's going to ask me, Yanko, Baruch, Yankee, is your maximum developed yet? Have you reached your maximum potential? I know the truth that it's not. So therefore today I have to maximize my potential. And I also know that the way it works, according to the logic of Chassidus and Torah, is that in order for me to maximize, there has to be a state of struggle, concealment, distance, etc. So that's the mashal that he gives in Samach Vav. We could also connect it with another famous Torah that was said in a different context, but it applies over here, the same word. And that's the famous word of the Shalah. What he said on the pasuk, Zeh keli v'amveyu, moed lekavot, elikeyavi v'arei mimenu. The Shalah said, when a Jew could say Zeh keli, when he could talk about God and religion and spirituality, say Zeh keli, this is my God. I relate to it. I feel like it's mine. Why am I doing this? Because I understand it. Why am I doing it? Because I find it the most exciting. Then it's vanveyu. The little meaning means, this is my God and I will glorify Him, beautify Him. But the Shalah said, Zeh keli, vanveyu anivuhu. Then I and Him become one word. The anveyu is made up of the words anivuhu, we become one. But if it's Zeh keli, why am I keeping religion? Because it's only because of the faith, not logic, emunah, not yediyah. The faith that I was given over from my parents. Why am I doing it? Because tradition. Minig Avosayim b'yadayni. But not really that it became totally internalized with me. Do I find it the best? Do I find it the most amazing? Am I getting excited about it? Is it really personal? Not necessarily. So then the Shalosh says, Varei mimenu. Varei mimenu literally means I will exalt God, but Varei mimenu over here means, exalt means distant. God is distant from me. He's removed. So it's the same thing over here. If it was Bikish Yaakov Legalis, and Yaakov would have been able to accomplish everything he wanted to accomplish, so it's not us, it's not Anivahu, it's a Lekeovi. My being inspired and my doing what I'm doing in Golas is because of Yaakov. It's not coming from me. So therefore it's Varei Mimenu, it's really distant. There's a part of me that's not involved. It didn't become totally one with me. And therefore it has to be that Yaakov's involvement has to be a bit not so revealed and obvious. Now I think for Lubavitchers, it's a painful thing to say, and I would never say it, and I hope nobody gets the wrong impression. We're in a situation now after Gimel Tammuz where there's no excuse for it, and it's terrible. And we've never been in such a darkness. But, the but is based on the sikh over here. Maybe we could say that we had to be in the circumstances that we're in now, like the Rebbe said himself in the Sikh of Chavchas Nissen, that the only reason you're screaming Ad Mosai is because I'm telling you to scream Ad Mosai, but you're not really doing it truthfully. So that means over here, we have to cry out every single day that Mashiach should come now, this second. But until this second, while I'm screaming that Mashiach should come this second, I have to work on myself more and more and try to ask myself more and more, is my whole involvement really me? Is it something personal? How much do I care about it? If someone looks at me, do they see a person who's all about Mashiach and all about Elikus and all about godliness and all about spirituality and all about the right values? Or do they see other things? If they see other things also, that means that it didn't become totally me yet. If they look at me, they should see Mr. Mashiach, Mr. Torah. That's what we live, breathe, etc. There's a story, we said this already before, but I'm going to say it again. And I think this is one of the most painful videos that we saw by the Rebbe. A woman came to the Rebbe. I don't remember exactly when. Could be Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, 91, 92. And she had a tearful voice. It was after Chav Ches Nissen, Nun Aleph sometime. And the Rebbe, and she tells the Rebbe, Rebbe, we need you. Like, you got to do it. You can't just hand it over to us. Because he said, the Rebbe had said, Ich gebe Sibut Za'aich. And she says, but I want my son back. Which seems that she lost her son. Hashem Yirachem. So any person watching that woman's plea, the heart melts. How much? How much could you suffer? Come on, please. And yet, the Rebbe's body seems to become tense. The Rebbe's holy body. And he tells the woman, but if I am the Rebbe, then I am telling you the only way it can happen, and he goes, is through you, and he points to the person on his right and the person on his left, is through you, and through you, and maybe he says through me, and through you, and through you. Which basically means that Mashiach cannot happen any other way if it's going to be the real Mashiach. We can have a superficial Mashiach. We can have an artificial Mashiach. We can have an external Mashiach. But if we want the real Mashiach, which is Pnimius, which is Emes, which is what the real intention was all along from the Eibishter, then there's only one way, through you, and through you, and through you. And that's the two sides. Yaakov Avinu Bikesh Legalis Sisaketz, we have to know about it. And what did he accomplish? He accomplished that we'll never forget this. That because he gave us this spirit of realizing that no matter how good life is on this planet Earth, it's not what it's all about. And that's what the Rebbe said in the famous Sikha of Asara B'Tevis, which is really justice for another whole talk, where Yaakov screams, Unasasani Mitzrayim, he made Yosef swear not to bury him in Egypt. And he says, take me out of Egypt. And the Rebbe said, Unasasani means we have to realize that we want to rise, we want to elevate, we want to go to a higher level than Golos. Our real reality, our real life is not Egypt, is not Australia, is not New York City, it's not Paris, it's not London. No matter how great it is, no matter how good our life would be, even if our life would be good, we have to constantly be screaming, Unasasani Mitzrayim. We have to become elevated. This is not what it is. And we also have to realize that only through serving Hashem in all these places do we become elevated. Also true. But who gave us that ability? Never to be fooled by the facade. Never to allow the cover-up to conceal. Who gave us this ability? This we got from Yaakov Avinu. How? Because he was Bikish Yaakov Legalis HaSaketz. He was successful to that degree, that there's always this spirit of transcendence, this spirit of something which is higher. And like I said in the pasuk before, Miksei haaretz elecha ekra, B'tzur yoram mimeni sancheni. Yaakov is the tzur yoram mimeni, and that gives us the ability to be able to ultimately get out of Mitzrayim. So the Eibusha should help. Now we understand what is Vayechi, how it's chazak, because now we realize how being even in Mitzrayim, we have the ability of Nesasani through the Bikish Yaakov Legalos, and this is the connection to Asara B'Tevis, even though we're in Golos. But again, this parsha that was in Asara B'Tevis tells us how to deal with the situation of Golos. We're never going to be satisfied with Golos. We'll never make peace with our circumstances. We're always crying out, we want Mashiach now, no matter what. V'yaf al pi sheyismameh ya'im kol zeh achak Eloi b'chol yoim sheyavoi. That's what we're obsessed about. That's what we talk about. That's where our eyes are at all times, focused and concentrated for what the Eibishter wants us really to desire. Every single minute to work on this mission to make the world a better place. And adira b'tachtonim. And if we live like that, then, which means ultimately we do grow from day to day, and we actually grow up and take responsibility and ownership in our Avodas Hashem. So in that, through that Avodah, we'll come to the Gula Mitzvah Shleima, take it from Miyad Mamash, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.